Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Rodney Sobin at NASEO. Welcome to the NASEO Industrial Working Group Forum today. This is a second in a series of forums. I see some familiar names and faces from last time, as well as some new ones too. You are all welcome here. We are happy to have presentations on three U.S. Department of Energy technical assistance programs, the industrial assessment centers, which will be presented by John Smeagol and I believe two of his colleagues, the CHP and Onsite Energy technical assistance partnerships. Megan Kelly, our friend from DOE, will be presenting on that, followed by a presentation by John O'Neill on the Better Plants program. We're also glad to have an IAC perspective, Industrial Assessment Center perspective, offered by Cody Powell of the Intermountain IAC in Salt Lake City, Utah, who is also representing Utah on the working group. Next slide, please. I also want to take a moment to thank DOE's Industrial Energy and Decarbonization Office, which is supporting our working group and our collaborations, and we're very grateful for that, as well as my NASEO colleague, Sam Kramer, who is working with me on this topic. We are recording this. There has been a request by some members of the working group who can't make this to make the recording available. We are oriented towards discussion, so when we are finished with the presentations, we will encourage questions and answers session, and you can either use the chat box or raise your hand and pipe up when that time comes. We also hope to have some time towards the end for open discussion and updates from the states. Next, please. A little bit, I went over the logistics there. Just a little bit of an overview of the working group for those who didn't tune in last time. Purpose of the working group is to help the state energy offices and other agencies and organizations within the state to identify, develop, and enhance the resources available to help their industries, their manufacturing industries and related industries in terms of energy and resource management. We hope that these forums and our other activities will improve cooperation and coordination across technical and business assistance programs in your states and in your regions and across federal, state, and locally and privately supported TA resources. The idea is also to support economic development and productivity, environmental protection and emissions reduction, and energy reliability and resilience objectives in the states. We're interested both in strengthening existing industries and helping you also to advance new technologies in industries. Next, please. So we have 17 states currently active in the working group, mostly the state energy offices, but also a few from other agencies and programs within their states. We have a pretty good webpage, I think, so check it out. Next, please. And I wanted to, and so we do have these web resources. We do provide periodic email updates on technical and business assistance programs, on funding opportunities and financial provisions, to alert you also to events, not only ours, but other organizations, relevant events, as well as pertinent tools and reports. I have listed there, I won't go through the list, some recent items, including some tools from the Renewable Thermal Collaborative. We also hope to have them present in a future forum. There are multiple Department of Energy and federal funding opportunities and RFIs related to manufacturing and industry. Many of them are for industry generally. Some of them are focused on particular segments of industry, including clean energy manufacturing. As you know, we're interested not only in PVs and EVs and other sorts of clean technologies as products, but also in sort of the mainstream manufacturing of everything from steel to food and beverage products. So we are interested in energy services, energy productivity, energy efficiency, in all those areas. Next, please. And I think, okay. And some future topics for forums and other exchanges. We're thinking of having one on the IRA tax credits for manufacturing, the 45X and 48C provisions. We do plan to have the NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership and EPA's Energy Star Industrial Program to present to you and to engage in conversation with you, as well as some other programs and provisions. And in each case, we also want to hear from you in the States about case studies, experiences, lessons, whether as a feature like Cody will present from Utah and the IAC experience, and we had the great Connecticut presentation last time, or in the informal discussion after the presentations. In any event, we do welcome your feedback and suggestions, and I think I babbled enough, so let me hand it to John Smeagol and for the discussion of the Industrial Assessment Center program. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rodney. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. As Rodney indicated, my name is John Smeagol. I work for Department of Energy, now the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, formerly the Advanced Manufacturing Office. The IAC program for which I am responsible, the core IAC program, as well as the newly announced Centers of Excellence. That's my responsibility. But as many of you know, and if you don't, you should, the IAC program is expanding dramatically. And accordingly, I have two of my colleagues. Some of these expansions are ongoing, as I alluded to, the Centers of Excellence just announced, and there's the expansion into new educational platforms, which the FOA was just put forth, and that'll be selected later this summer. And then there's the immense implementation grant program. So I have brought a couple of my colleagues along to talk about specific components. First off is Jeremy Avens, who is the overall manager within MESC, as we call it, Manufacturing Energy Supply Chains, responsible for all aspects of the IAC program. And then Mustafa Mahmoud, who's responsible for the standing up and getting going, which is imminent, of the implementation grant program. So we're going to sort of tag team this presentation. So it does lead to a little complications because eventually someone's going to have to turn on the microphones for the individuals. So I guess we'll start with that. Next slide. And I think Jeremy is going to take over for me. So if someone could turn on Jeremy's mic, that would be great. And then I'll take over in a few slides.
Thanks, John. And can folks hear me okay? Okay.
Yep.
Great. Good to be with you all. Thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about IAC. So here's 4 topics that we wanted to run through in about 10 or 12 slides. Just quickly on the organizational context, John mentioned the MESC office that we're in now. A little overview of the IAC program and the bipartisan infrastructure law expansions that John mentioned, and then do a deep dive on some of the particular pieces with sort of live developments and opportunities. So we go to the next slide. Great. So as John mentioned, with the infrastructure law funded expansion of the IAC program, the program is now sitting in a new part of DOE with a number of other bill and IRA programs called the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, or MESC, which, as it says here, has the mission of strengthening and securing manufacturing and energy supply chains to modernize energy infrastructure and support the energy transition. So this is an office that's really focused on kind of the deployment side of DOE's work. If you think about it as a spectrum from initial R&D to demonstration and to deployment and scale, MESC is sort of in the latter parts of that spectrum, overseeing about $16 billion in programs of grants and tax credits, mostly from the infrastructure law and IRA. And you can see a few of the sort of broad areas of focus within here. And of course, that third area, bolstering smaller and medium manufacturers. And then the fourth bullet around developing energy workforce capabilities are both especially core to the IAC programs goals, but there's a number of programs around us. And I think some of them may have spoken with you all before, and we can talk more to it as helpful. But that's kind of the ecosystem in which the program is sitting now, while still very much working closely with and connected to our colleagues in ERE, who will be speaking later. If we go to the next slide, this is just the kind of overarching vision of the IAC program. It's really a two-part vision, the first being the workforce development aspect of building a skilled clean energy and manufacturing workforce that represents the diversity of America. And then alongside that, reinvigorating the manufacturing base so that it's prepared to lead the global clean energy transition. So it's really that two-part workforce development and manufacturing strengthening elements are sort of the two core pillars of the IAC program. And then just going into a little bit more detail on the next slide on the sort of origins and arc of the program. So the IAC program has been around for since the 1970s, with concordant with that two-part vision that has these two sort of practical purposes of training the next generation of energy savvy engineers and more broadly energy management workers as we move more into the skilled trades space, which John will speak to, and then also to provide no-cost technical assistance, usually in the form of in-depth energy assessments to small and medium-sized manufacturers. So the program has both annual appropriations, long-running annual appropriations, bipartisan support, and the major bill expansions. And through the years, the program has continued to adapt to changes in the manufacturing sector and industry and energy policy, taking on recently, for example, increased focus on decarbonization and resiliency planning. You can see in the map on the right, the current network, all currently based at four-year universities. There are 37 IACs, as well as a number of satellites that are affiliated with the sort of host centers, and over time have made over or nearly 150,000 recommendations to manufacturers, which we're excited to be able to financially support some of the implementation of going forward. So that's kind of an overview, and I'll turn it back to John to take us into some of the specifics of what's going on these days.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. All right, next slide. Okay, basically the expansion of the IAC program as embodied in the bill was $550 million total, of which there were two basic components. Two is the theme here. The first component is $150 million expansion over 5 years to that sort of deals with the operating of the existing program and expansions on new sort of areas that we're getting into. The first is which were recently announced, the selection of 5 new centers of excellence, which were chosen from the existing centers. And these new centers of excellence have, in addition to being centers still, they have this elevated regional sort of set of responsibilities that I'll get into a little bit more that involve essentially expanding the adoption of technologies, particularly within the decarbonization space as laid out within DOE's decarbonization roadmap, sort of deployment of those kinds of technologies, as well as additional technologies that are going to assist in expanding the reach of the program to very, very small manufacturers and providing more enhanced, longer-term technical assistance beyond just sort of the traditional assessments that we already conduct. So that's the province of the centers of excellence. Then there's this new FOA, which went out on the same day that the selections of these 5 centers of excellence were announced on April 7th. That's going to expand the program into trade schools, community colleges, and union training programs. So that's a whole new set of platforms for delivery of not the same exact services that the IACs currently provide, but a version of them that are appropriate to the level upon which they are being delivered from. So that's what's also coming. And then there's a host of other things having to do with the National Clearinghouse for information data. There's a rather significant program for apprenticeships and internships. All of these are forthcoming. And then beyond this 150 million, which is sort of what I've just described, there's a 400 million over 5 years. So 80 million per year for implementation grants. So that's the two components. I'll briefly touch upon those, at least in terms of how they relate to the existing program and the centers of excellence. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mustafa, who will talk about the ins and outs of the grant program. Next slide, please. So this is where the centers of excellence, the ones that were announced on April 7th, are currently located. The centers themselves are actually not one entity, because as it turns out, a number of centers, existing centers, teamed up with other centers because they felt that was the best way to deliver a fairly broad-based set of activities. So the Mid-Atlantic Center of Excellence is in fact 2 existing centers that would be headquartered at Lehigh in collaboration with West Virginia. Then there's a Southeastern Center of Excellence, which is at Georgia Tech, as well as the other existing center, which is in the Georgia area, or the Atlanta area, excuse me, and that's Kennesaw State. And then there's their satellites, which are affiliated with them. Then there's the Gulf Coast, which is at Texas A&M, the Great Plains Center of Excellence, which is at Oklahoma State, in partnership with University of Nebraska, and then their associated satellites. And then finally, over on the West Coast, there's a bracket of 3, as it turns out, existing centers. That would be San Francisco State, San Diego State, and San Jose State, all teaming up to form one center of excellence along the West Coast. So, all right, so that's sort of what recently was announced. We're going to have these folks ideally under award and negotiated through, and they should be up and running in the June and July timeframe. And there's a host of activities that we're looking to engage in over the coming years. All right, next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to talk really few about this. I mean, we announced FOA for a total of 54 million. This includes 45 million for this expansion into these new platforms that I alluded to. There's much smaller awards, a shorter time period, befitting sort of the nature and probably the number of students engaged. But if you're looking at total numbers, talking up to 60 or 70 of these entities providing new services within these new platforms. And then there's another component of that FOA, which also relates to specifically up to 15 awards at union training programs to provide specific green energy related upskilling within a union context, because unions, as we all know or should know, have rather significantly developed training programs for their members. And so we're looking to partner and piggyback with their efforts and their training capabilities to provide, again, clean energy, green energy skill set to these entities. And then lastly, our colleagues over also in ERE, the buildings office, they have these building training and assessment centers, which are providing commercial buildings training, commercial buildings assessment training to folks. And there's sort of a hybrid situation where they're going to be potentially located or co-located at industrial assessment centers, but they will be separate entities, at least in terms of funding sources, but they're going to be looking at commercial building activities. And so we're, furthering the partnerships these have had with the folks in ERE, whether we're talking about the CHP taps, which are now the on-site energy generation taps, and our long-standing partnership with the Better Plants and to some extent the Better Buildings folks as well. All right, next slide. Oh, there we are. Okay. Oh, and at this point, I'll talk about this briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Mustafa if that's okay. This is essentially the beginnings of what will be the implementation grant program, and I'll leave it to him to talk about the specifics in terms of expected timeframes and some of the ins and outs and details of that. Mustafa, someone's going to have to turn on his mic. You all set?
I think I was able to get it. Can you guys all hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. thank you everyone for having me. And as John mentioned before, helping support standing up the IAC implementation grants. And so as folks are aware, and as John mentioned, it's that $400 million in dedicated funding for the next 5 years, so through fiscal year 2026, to distribute grants of a maximum of $300,000 per manufacturer at a 50% cost share to implement recommendations that are conducted, implementations that are from IAC assessments, DOE, CHP, and TAP assessments, as well as this third part of the statute, which refers to assessments deemed equivalent by the DOE. To note here, again, this is eligible for small and medium manufacturers. The statute defines small and medium manufacturers as a firm with less than $100 million in gross sales, fewer than 500 employees at the facility of interest, and then an annual energy bills between $100,000 and $3.5 million. So that's a bit of an overview of the actual statute. If you go to the next slide. So this one, it looks like the left-hand side got a little cut off, but basically these are some of the projects that have an opportunity to be covered within the IAC program. And so if it's a project that helps improve site energy or material efficiency, improves the site cybersecurity practices or program, we're able to optimize the productivity within a production facility. And so if I'm able to make more product at the same resource that I have, reducing site waste and production, but also if I'm able to reduce site greenhouse gases or non-greenhouse pollution. And so see, these are some of the covered projects that are eligible to apply and receive funding of this IAC implementation grants. If you go to the next slide, when thinking about, as I mentioned before, these grants are at a maximum of $300,000 at a 50% cost share. And so, for example, if the cost to implement a project was $200 million, it would be, well, for example, because it's a maximum of $300,000. So let's say, for an example, if it's $600,000, the IAC implementation grants would pay up to $300,000, and then the manufacturer or the recipient would be responsible for the rest of the $300,000. And so, when thinking about what are allowable types for that non-federal share, cost share portion, so these are cash contributions, so direct contributions made by the manufacturer to pay for whether it's the cost for your contractors, the cost for equipment, things like that. In-kind contributions, and so this could be if there is a piece of equipment that you want to install, like a pump, if you are able to get a donated piece of equipment, that can potentially count as in-kind contribution. Additionally, if there is time being donated, whether it's a contractor or a consultant that's donating some time, rather than you charging them directly, that can be captured as a potential in-kind contribution. And lastly, some unrecovered indirect costs. This again will require approval from prior approval with the agency before going down this route. And then when thinking about some of those prohibited costs, and so the main one is costs paid by federal government under another award. So you can't lump together getting rewarded from the IAC implementation grants program and pairing that with another award and saying, I'm going to use that other award to pay for the non-federal share for this project, right? So making sure that that's one. In addition, a pre-cost award that are decided on prior to signing the selection. And so ideally all costs and award should be the costs that are allowed are costs that are allowable and allocable to the project. And so when thinking about fee or profits, including fees and foregone fees and profits, those are also do not count with within the cost share. And so thinking about that and thinking on the right-hand side and what, small and medium manufacturers, there may be some difficulties in whether or not, depending on how big the project is, of having all the capital ready to go up front and being able to have that and meet that cost share. And so on the right-hand side of thinking of potential options for these small and medium manufacturers to leverage to help address and meet that non-federal cost share portion. And so when thinking about, state and local public programs, or those are loans or grants, again, making sure that that funding doesn't directly come from federal funding. If there's an opportunity there, they can leverage that. Thinking about private loans, from either including SBA guaranteed loans, things like that. Utility programs are oftentimes where if you are installing an energy efficient process or piece of technology, you are able to secure a rebate program. There are also opportunities to use on-bill financing mechanisms, which the utility will provide you capital to install a project and you'll pay back through the bill. And then some other ones include leases of leasing out equipment to leverage, and then energy saving performance contracts where you're working with an energy service company to execute the project. Again, they're managing, they're helping install and maintain the project, and then they'll be able to take a portion of that savings given that they're able to implement. So if you go to the next slide here, just wanted to highlight, and I think this applies to not just the IAC implementation grants, but a lot of the projects and the programs that we are launching across the Department of Energy. We also want to ensure that we are building that clean and equitable energy economy. And so when we look at this across 4 different priorities here, as I've listed out, the Justice 40. And so as released by the current administration, of making sure that we either meet or exceed the objectives of dedicating 40% of benefits to disadvantaged communities, ensuring that we are driving our DE&I mission, so ensuring equitable access to wealth building opportunities, jobs, contract opportunities, things like that. And then in regards to creating good jobs, we do want to create good paying jobs to retain, attract, ensure workers have a good environment. But in addition, creating that space where the voice for the workers can have a voice in terms of decisions that may impact them. And then lastly, workforce and community agreements, meaningful engagement with community and labor partners leading up to formal agreements, labor agreements. I see some questions here in the chat. Yeah, there is a Buy American component part of this, as we want to ensure that we are sourcing and sourcing materials and contractors, whatever that may be, internally in the US. Yep, that is correct. And then I see another one from Todd. Can manufacturers also receive federal tax credit for their projects? That is a good question. I can take that one off the top of my head. I don't have a clear answer, but I can take that as a follow-up and reply back. But that is a good question. I can follow up right after this. I think that is the last slide I had. If you go to the next one, I think it wraps up some of the upcoming opportunities, as John and Jeremy mentioned. So we have this first round or tranche of implementation grants that we are launching here shortly. This will focus on, again, small and medium manufacturers who have gone through an IAC assessment or a DOE CHP assessment. They'll be able to apply to have some of those recommendations funded. And then we are working on collecting application and qualifying folks as additional assessors. So as part of the statute mentioned, there is that IAC equivalent assessments that could potentially be eligible for future rounds of funding. And so we want to collect applications from folks who do execute assessments, whether that may be, your MEPs, private sectors, utilities, if they feel like their assessments are a good way and a good opportunity for us to kind of qualify those recommendations, we want to have those. And then I think in turn, with John standing up the IAC COEs of that regional collaboration with those IAC centers of excellence, right? To help to use them and leverage them to help expand and grow the program as much as possible.
Okay.
I think
If we can move to, are you done, Mustafa?
I think that is all I had. Yep.
Okay. Well, let's, I'm sure there'll be other questions that arise, but let's, in the interest of time, let's move on to Megan. And while she's getting started, I'll remind the audience that the IACs work within sort of a geographic boundary of something like 150-mile radius, which I think is a bit elastic. So if there is not an IAC in your state within its boundaries, that does not mean that you don't have IAC services. So keep that in mind, please. Okay, 2 thumbs up. Megan, take it away.
Thanks, Rod. Hi, everybody. I'll take just a minute to introduce myself here. I'm Megan Kelly with the Industrial Efficiency and Decarbonization Office in EERE, which of course we created an acronym for and pronounce IEDO. So if I say that, that's what I'm referring to. We're part of what was known until last year as the Advanced Manufacturing Office, in case folks are familiar, and we in IEDO work on both R&D and deployment style technical assistance activities. I joined DOE in 2020, and my portfolio currently includes our technical assistance efforts around combined heat and power and on-site energy. Next slide. I'm gonna start with a little background. I'll tell you about the CHP TAPs, who they are and what they do. I will share a couple of examples of how the CHP TAPs have worked directly with state energy offices in the past, and tell you about some tools and resources that you might find useful. We hope you'll find useful when you're working in your states on industrial decarbonization. And then I'm going to tell you about where we're headed with the program looking to the future. I'll share a little bit about where we see things going in terms of transitioning from CHP TAPs to on-site energy TAPs. And I guess I'll just say now, up front, essentially for more than 20 years, DOE's had technical assistance to advance deployment of CHP and also waste heat to power and district energy technologies. And to the evolution of the program and also the evolution of the needs in the industrial space leads us to continue our work on CHP, waste heat to power and district energy, but also leverage the existing TAP program model to build on it and deliver TA for an additional set of on-site technology solutions. So there's more to come on that last piece, but please keep that in mind as you hear how the CHP TAPs work, that we're going to be working to expand what we have done for CHP to include more technologies. Next slide. Super quick context on CHP. There's 81.5 gigawatts installed at more than 4,700 sites. It's long been used in buildings and plants to save energy and save money and reduce GHGs. You can see on the left side of the graph, there's a lot of CHP installed in industry where there's high demand for process heat, but the use of CHP has also been growing a lot in recent years in non-industrial applications and in commercial and institutional facilities, especially places like hospitals and multifamily buildings and campuses where maybe they need less capacity, but they really value CHP for resilience and reliability. Next slide. So it's because of those benefits that DOE has this technical assistance partnerships program to support the installation of CHP, and it's been a really effective program for the agency. The CHP TAPs are 10 regional entities that we have cooperative agreements with to deliver several different types of support. They work with end users like manufacturers who are interested in exploring CHP or have questions about whether it might be a good fit for them. They also engage with stakeholders like utilities and policymakers who are addressing issues around CHP, and they provide specialized technical services, which can include things like site screenings, engineering analyses, environmental studies, and other assessments. I think I'll just say one more thing on this slide, which is the regional approach is really one of the key aspects, I think, of this program's success, and it's a hugely important piece of what we plan to leverage when we think about the transition of the program from CHP only to working on more technologies. So as you all know very well, there's very different dynamics across the country when it comes to what the energy sector looks like. what resources are available, what energy prices are, and also what the manufacturing sector looks like, and what products and services are being made where. And so having the TAPs who are there in the field, really close to the ground, and have relationships and understanding of some of the unique considerations in the region with utility service territories or state policies and everything that comes with all of that is really key to accelerating deployment through a program like this. Next slide. Okay, this is a slide I'm most excited about. When we think about the TAPs, we often think about them helping end users explore opportunities at their sites, but the TAPs do a lot of engagement with other stakeholders, and I wanted to give you a little flavor of how the CHP TAPs have worked with state energy offices in the past. I saw Ben Bolton's on the call, and actually Ben presented at the CHP TAP directors meeting recently at Oak Ridge last summer, and I wish I had a photo of that here on the slide, but alas. So the TAPs regularly deliver presentations and host webinars, and even facilitate and organize trainings in partnership with state energy offices. So in the upper left, that's representatives from the Southeast CHP TAP who have collaborated with the South Carolina Energy Office on a number of different engagements. The TAPs have also supported states in their energy planning efforts. So in this example in the upper right from Virginia, the Mid-Atlantic CHP TAP worked closely with the Virginia Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy to do an activity that was recommended in the state's energy plan. So the energy plan included a recommendation to develop a roadmap to achieve 750 megawatts of additional CHP capacity in the state by 2030. And the TAP supported that effort, providing DMME with subject matter expertise and technical data and analysis. The TAPs in the bottom right also help organize and participate in stakeholder engagement efforts that are led by State Energy Office. So the photo on this slide is from just a couple of weeks ago at the My Healthy Climate Conference in Detroit, where the Midwest CHP TAP was invited by the Energy Office to participate and present on industrial decarbonization concepts and strategies. And lastly, outreach events. The example on this slide is from a recent NASEO meeting where the New England CHP TAP director on the left there is pictured with Dan Burgess from the Maine Energy Office. And actually, there's a really cute story from that one where Maine's governor visited the TAP at the event. We had some handouts there detailing several successful projects in the state, and she was interested in learning more about them, and it was a good information exchange. The next slide. Yes, so some of those resources that the governor from Maine was interested in were project profiles. So we have I think you all might be interested in finding resources about projects in your state, and we have a database that contains 2-page case studies of successful CHP projects, and it includes stuff like how efficient are they, how much energy have they saved, how much GHGs have they reduced, what were some lessons learned in trying to get the project done. We also have a similar set of case studies, but they're focused on policies or programs impacting CHP and sort of like the history of how they were developed and what the outcomes were, and lessons learned in implementing them. So there's over 300 profiles taken all together. A lot of them were developed recently, so these resources are up to date. And I thought the policy program profiles might be of interest to you all. You can see the kinds of topics that are covered by them in the graph, and how many profiles there are in each of those sort of like subject matter areas. And the majority of them are state and local programs. It's super easy to visit the website and look at if these are issues that you're dealing with. Take a look. Next slide. I'm going to do this one even faster. I'll just spend 1 minute here on some resources that we have related to package CHP, because there are 4 energy offices that collaborated with us on this effort, and I just want to highlight that. So DOE developed a national searchable web-based catalog we call the e-catalog that includes information about over 340 packages of CHP systems from different suppliers. We verify their data. We make the information available to anybody who's exploring CHP to kind of learn like what options are out there. And as part of that, there's a network of partners, the customer engagement network over on the right side, which includes states and utilities and other agencies. And you can see the logos from Maryland and Missouri and New Jersey and New York across the top there. So those states were using the e-catalog as a way to market their programs related to CHP, and that could be an option for any of you if you're interested. Next slide. Okay, last cool tool. I thought you might find handy if you aren't aware of these CHP and microgrid installation databases that DOE maintains. So the CHP database is one that's been around for a long time. It has data on all the CHP installations in the US, what kind of fuel they use, what size they are, what kind of facility they're located at. And more recently, in 2021, we launched a microgrid database, which is very similar. It includes data on every microgrid installation. There's over 685 in the database right now. They can both be searched by state, so you can easily learn about all the microgrids, where you live, when they were installed, what mix of technologies they use, and other information. And the microgrid database was an early kind of transitional activity for the CHP program, really to start looking at how CHP works with other renewable and storage technologies. And in the last few years, we've really doubled down on that transition, and that's what I'll share on the next slide. So here's where we're headed with this work in the future. This slide gives an overview of the vision for the Onsite Energy Program, which again encompasses the work that we've historically done around CHP, plus new work on additional technologies. And the primary goal is to establish a regional network of TAPs to help industrial facilities and other large energy users adopt clean on-site technologies. We've listed some technologies here on the slide that we expect stakeholders to be interested in, including renewables like solar and wind, and also storage, both batteries and thermal, and other technologies. We're really open to providing support for a broad range of on-site technologies. The focus is really that the technologies need to be mature and ready for deployment. So our support as we launch this program will really be focused on solutions that are well demonstrated and really in need of our assistance to accelerate the adoption. Next slide. Okay, we've been talking with a lot of industrial end users about their challenges and barriers. We know that they're increasingly looking for ways to integrate clean energy on their sites, and reduce their use of fossil fuels. We understand companies are concerned with a number of different issues: high upfront capital costs with doing renewables, needing to have space available for certain solutions, figuring out how to engage with their utilities, and many other challenges. And so these are the kinds of considerations that we're going to be working with stakeholders to address through the Onsite program as we look ahead. Next slide. And this is my last slide. So where are we now with the Onsite program, and when will the TAPs be up and running? We released a funding opportunity announcement to solicit a new round of Onsite TAPs in February. The CHP TAPs will continue until their cooperative agreements end towards the end of this year. We are reviewing applications that came in for the TAP FOA now. We expect to make selections this summer. After that, frankly, there will be a couple of months to negotiate and finalize agreements and get things going. So we could expect things to start in earnest, I think, around the new fiscal year, FY24. There's a number of things that we're going to be working on between now and then, including some research and analysis to really put a finer point on what we think the scale of the opportunity is for on-site energy and industry. We're also developing some early case studies based on work with industrial companies using DOE tools to explore distributed energy resources at their sites. So there's a lot to look forward to. If anybody has thoughts or questions or ideas or interest in collaborating now, even as we're gearing up, very open to talking about those. So please do reach out. I think my contact information is on the next slide. And with that, I'll wrap it up and thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Megan. And remind people that we do hope to have some Q&A time, so get your questions ready. And John O'Neill is next up to bat.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John O'Neill. I am also in the Industrial Efficiency and Decarbonization Office, or IEDA. I manage the Better Plants and the Better Climate Challenge programs for the Department of Energy. I've been with the DOE for a little under 2 years now, and about 1.5 years of which I've spent on these two programs. So we can go ahead to the next slide, please. So the Better Plants and Better Climate Challenge are two, we'll call them sister programs, that are dedicated to helping manufacturers and other industrial organizations, which functionally means water and wastewater utilities, as well as manufacturers, save money and improve their sustainability in these 4 key areas: energy productivity, greenhouse gas emissions, water savings, and waste reduction. Next slide, please. So the way we do this is it's all centered around an ambitious, long-term, and portfolio-wide goal that we ask all of our partners to set. In contrast to some of the other programs we've heard about today, which have sort of a regional character and are more focused on facility level, the Better Plants and Better Climate Challenge program asks our partners to set corporate portfolio-wide goals across their U.S. portfolio. For the Better Plants program, that means a 25% improvement in energy intensity over 10 years. And for the Better Climate Challenge, that means a 50% reduction in absolute greenhouse gas emissions over 10 years. We also have water and mechanisms for partners to set and work towards water and waste reduction goals with us as well. But there's a little bit more flexibility there. So partners commit to this ambitious goal. They commit to sharing their progress towards that goal with us by submitting their annual energy and emissions data. And they're committing to sharing their knowledge, their experience, how they're getting there with their peers in the program. And in exchange, we provide technical assistance that's direct and ongoing. We develop tools, resources, and trainings for them to leverage and convene our partners together along with subject matter experts. Basically a whole host of things that help them actually functionally achieve their goal. Next slide, please. So this slide looks like we got a little distorted here. Hopefully none of my other ones are too messed up here. But this slide depicts sort of the 4 broad categories of reasons why a partner might join the Better Plants program. So primarily, I should say primarily, first is recognition. So this is an opportunity for us to highlight leading companies, so the ones that are really doing good work and making good progress on energy efficiency and decarbonization. We like to hold those up with the express intent of then catalyzing additional follow-on action. It's also an effort to connect our partners with the innovation happening at the DOE National Labs and a number of other mechanisms, the R&D happening across our office and other DOE technology offices as well, so that they can make use of the innovative technology they'll need to achieve their goals. There's a workforce development component as well. So we have a number of trainings. I'll go through some of these in more detail over the course of the presentation, but a number of trainings to help manufacturers upskill their existing workforce to be sort of better prepared to meet their energy and emissions goals. And then, of course, and this is probably the cornerstone, it's technical assistance as well. So in a number of different ways, it's the things that we do, the tools we provide to our partners to help them achieve the goals that they're setting out to achieve. And then on top of this, it's really important to know too that we envision Better Plants as a nexus point, a connection to the rest of DOE. And so it's sort of their entry into understanding all of the stuff that's going on across the department, connections to the other programs you heard about today, as well as many other opportunities. Next slide, please. I won't spend much time on this. It's kind of hard to pull too much information out of this busy slide, but this is all of our Better Plants partners. I do like to show this slide because you can at the very least see that there's a very high number and a very diverse list of companies that see the value in this program. So we really do think we provide a very useful set of resources for our partners. And then on the next slide, we also have all of our Better Climate Challenge partners represented as well. Next, please. So I'll forewarn you just a little bit before I get into the rest of this presentation. Better Plants and the Better Climate Challenge, they're very big programs, and we do a lot of different things in these programs to support our partners. So I want to just sort of forewarn you that the rest of this is going to sort of feel, it's going to feel like a lot of information very quickly, because it is. But I do want to sort of give an overview of the different things that we provide to our partners, so you just get a flavor for what it would mean for a manufacturer to engage with us. So I'll go sort of category by category from those 4 categories I showed earlier. The cornerstone of the technical assistance pillar, which I'll start with, is the technical account manager. Every company that partners with us gets access to a national lab expert in industrial energy efficiency. This person helps them identify energy savings opportunities, really get a handle on their energy data, and again, be that sort of main point of contact with the rest of the program, and understand the new opportunities that we roll out are disseminated to all of our partners. We like this quote here on the bottom. Our partners see it as sort of having a free consultant on retainer for them to leverage. Next slide, please. Another popular offering with our partners is the diagnostic equipment program. This is an opportunity for us we lend out free of charge a variety of energy measurement tools. So things like infrared temperature guns, water conductivity probes, anemometers, combustion analyzers, ultrasonic leak detectors, all of these things that help partners quantify energy savings opportunities in their facilities, but that they might not have on hand. So this is a really great opportunity to sort of allow them to make use of that equipment without necessarily needing to purchase it themselves. And we've got something like 30 different tools that we have accessible to partners through this program. Next slide, please. Another, what I'd say is sort of cornerstone of effort of ours is the couple of software tools that we have developed over the years. So the Measure tool suite is sort of the cornerstone, I would say. This is a collection of a number of different energy assessment and system assessment tools that have been developed over years and years at the Department of Energy. They've all been sort of collated and rolled into this one tool suite. They're much more user-friendly, they're open source, cross-platform. We've got a number of different assessment modules for common industrial systems in there for folks to compare baseline energy usage with sort of what if comparisons or what if analyses. And this is just something that we're sort of consistently adding to. So there's 7 full assessment modules, as well as something like 70 additional standalone calculators for different industrial systems. Next slide, please. The Verify tool is another one that is increasingly important for us. So this actually is the next evolution of a tool that the Department of Energy used to support, called the Enpi tool, the Energy Performance Indicator tool. Verify stands for Visualizing Energy Reporting Information and Financial Implications. This is all about utility bill analysis, dashboarding, data visualization. and also built-in regression analysis on energy bills as well. So this is a really powerful tool. It's currently in beta mode, but we have partners that are, they're actively using this to get a handle on their energy data. Next slide, please. In the interest of time, I won't dive into these in too much depth, but we have a number of other sort of loose tools that are available as well. One on carbon inventories, one on electrification impacts, so understanding cost and emissions savings and energy bill impacts for certain electrification opportunities, and then a low carbon action plan tool as well that helps partners sort of put together and visualize their pathways on a facility level to decarbonizing. Next slide, please. And then we also have a number of different sort of sub-initiatives within Better Plants and the Better Climate Challenge, geared specifically towards water efficiency and water savings, waste reduction, and supply chain. So, upstream, scope 3, embedded energy, and emissions. Won't spend a lot of time here. The first two are essentially they're structured similarly with a goal that partners can then report towards. And then the last one is a way for our partners to engage a cohort of their upstream suppliers to help them have access to some of the Better Plants tools that we make available so that they can they can see reductions in their immediate scope 1 and scope 2 emissions and their own energy use, and then the downstream purchaser gets the benefit of improving the performance of their overall supply chain. Next slide, please. So the workforce development angle of this program is sort of the next quadrant in the bottom right of that graphic I showed. We have a number of different training opportunities, the first of which we call in-plant trainings. These are essentially a sort of a mix between an energy assessment and a field demonstration of how to perform an assessment. So it's both it's both an assessment and a training on how to do an assessment, basically. The way these work it's a 3 to 4 day event. We send out program experts, energy efficiency experts to a site, and they spend 3 or 4 days going through the plant with the partner, identifying opportunities for savings and quantifying those. And usually there's a presentation at the end as well. Next slide, please. We have a number of virtual training opportunities as well that have been really impactful. We pivoted to these during COVID. These were sort of a replacement for the in-plant trainings, but we have since been doing both of these in parallel. A number of different topics that you can see on the right there. We're continually adding to that list, and just continually improving on this option as well. We always have one of these active at any given time, really. Next slide, please. The final training component that we offer, at least for now, is what we call energy and decarbonization boot camps. So these are basically 3 to 4 day crash courses on energy and decarbonization fundamentals. So we bring folks, our partners, down to Oak Ridge National Lab. They get a chance to have sort of a mix of classroom, PowerPoint learning, understanding material, as well as hands-on demonstrations. They learn how to use those diagnostic equipment tools that we talked about before. And this is our effort to get employees of our partners up to speed very quickly. This is sort of geared towards new hires and things like that, to really build a culture of decarbonization and energy efficiency. Next slide, please. We also, one of the things that we do to encourage our partners to be innovative and to adopt new technologies is technology days. We host these on a rotating basis at different national labs in the DOE system, and we put on poster sessions and tours of user facilities and things like that, so that partners really understand that the national labs are there as a resource for them to leverage as well. Next slide, please. We also have the industrial technology validation pilot. So to just go with a totally other thing here, this is a program that we offer whereby we partner up a technology vendor of an innovative technology with an industrial host site. And we match them up and provide in-kind support in the form of measurement and verification so that we can basically be a trusted third party on verifying performance claims for different technologies. In the interest of time, we'll just keep plugging away here. The next slide, we're also a recognition program. This is sort of the fourth of the four quadrants. We do a number of different things to showcase our leading partners. So we recognize our goal achievers at our annual summit. That's the trophy there, and they're recognized on stage. On the bottom there, we've got pictures for our Better Project and Practice Awards. These are, awards for sort of discrete efforts that our partners are working on that we think are worth highlighting and sharing with the broader marketplace. And then a new thing that you'll see on the top right there is what we're developing this video series called the Better Climate Challenge Roadshow, where we're actually, going out and doing video tours of different facilities within our program to highlight innovation and best practices on decarbonization and energy efficiency.
John, if you can finish within the next 2 minutes or so.
Yep, you got it. So the next couple slides will be breezed through like 10 seconds each. Better Building Solutions Center is our website where we host all of this information and our case studies that we publish. Again, the idea is that we highlight best practices and leadership, and then push that out so that is, adopted more broadly throughout the marketplace. Next slide, please. A couple of examples of the other online learning resources that we offer, webinars that we offer throughout the year. We have the recordings of those up as well, so they're sort of always available to anybody at any time. Next slide, please. Number of resource documents that we have developed over the years. Anything from best practices and sort of tip sheets all the way up to very detailed and involved guidance documents as well on particular topics. Next slide, please. Don't want to spend much time on here, but we host a number of working groups and peer exchange opportunities for partners to learn from one another. So that's what this slide is showing. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to close with a little bit of maybe some brainstorming here, some possible ways that the program could collaborate with state energy offices. We could do something like a webinar that's convened by an SEO with a state's manufacturing base, so that we can make more people aware of these resources, which again are totally free of charge to our partners in exchange for their commitment. But there are also some of them that are not specifically reserved for partners either. There could be ways that we could leverage the network of Better Plants partners. We partner with about 14% of the total manufacturing footprint in the US. So that's a lot of really valuable information that could maybe inform state policy. And we have a lot of sector specific expertise within our technical account managers as well. Next slide, please. Quick slide on impacts, but I know I'm running over my time. The program is very impactful. We've had a partner say, a partner recommended a new recruit to the program saying, if you want to go farther and faster with energy efficiency, you've got to sign up for Better Plants. So we really think we just are doing a great job of accelerating leadership in energy efficiency and decarbonization. That's it for me. I should have maybe bit off a little bit less with that presentation, but hopefully that's useful and you get a sense for what the program's all about, and we can take questions at the end. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Yeah, thank you, John. You guys and gals are doing a lot of good stuff, so it's hard to make compact. I will remind everyone that we do have links to all of these and other programs on the working groups webpage. Cody, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to my DOE colleagues for the explanation of all these great DOE programs. I'm following up on John Smiegel's presentation about industrial assessment centers and some of the expansion programs associated with them. Specifically, I'm going to talk about ways that we work with our state energy office, and one specific way. I also have my colleague from the Utah Office of Energy Development who will make some comments at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, so the IACs are your boots on the ground. We are going out to all these industrial facilities and we're identifying real problems and trying to find solutions to some of these problems. So a big issue with decarbonization, as it's probably no surprise to anybody, is that if we are relying predominantly on renewable energy, we get these supply and demand mismatch issues. So I'm just showing here, notice the different units and the different magnitude here, but this gives you a pretty good insight into the mismatch between supply. This is solar energy data collected from the state of Texas, and then demand. This is a load profile also for the state of Texas over the course of a day. So there's this natural mismatch here, and that's one thing that IACs and researchers are trying to help resolve if we want to push toward a truly decarbonized economy. Next slide, please. So I'm sure, given the audience, you are very familiar with this idea of the duck curve, which has been identified as solar energy's greatest challenge. So these are net demand curves. This is now like nearly a decade old. I guess it is a decade old when they started making these forecasts, but we're seeing this happen in real data for CAISO, California's independent system operator, where the more and more additions of solar create this major trough in the net demand, and that's causing all the fossil fuel power plants to have to dramatically ramp up in the late afternoon or early evening. So this is something we want to help tackle this problem. So I'm really glad that DOE, and especially IEDO, that I've heard of IEDO, I haven't heard it actually spelled out like that, so I appreciate my colleagues doing that. I'm grateful for them recognizing this supply and demand mismatch issue, and also recognizing that the industrial sector can be a major solution to this supply and demand mismatch problem. Next slide. So I think Rodney may have had this FOA listed early on. This is the IEDO multi-topic funding opportunity announcements. So generally, they're targeting industrial decarbonization. One of their topics, this subtopic 3A, is enabling flexible industrial energy use. So this is something that our IAC here in Utah has really specialized in, is identifying ways that industry can be more flexible, because this is much lower hanging fruit in terms of capital costs than battery systems, for example. So I'm not saying that battery systems or other energy storage systems are not the prominent solutions to this supply and demand mismatch problem, but I do strongly believe that we can just operate a little bit smarter, get some of that low-hanging fruit, and leverage flexibility that already exists out there in the built environment. Next slide. Oh, and it looks like it says, can we work smarter and not just harder, in that top part of the slide. And I have this quote from Albert Einstein saying, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So one of our issues as a society is that historically we've relied on fossil fuels, which are dispatchable. You can burn coal or burn natural gas on demand. And so what we've done, as demand grows, we just build more and more power plants. And I think it's really important for us as a nation and as a society to be a little bit smarter in the way that we're deploying technologies. So I don't think we want to just keep building bigger and building more, even if it's now solar and batteries. Again, those are important technologies, but I think we can do it in a smarter way if we are strategic about this. So as an IAC director, we're out in these industrial facilities, we're seeing all of these opportunities for industry to be more responsive to signals from the grid and to help be a source of flexibility that could be leveraged by the grid and help us decarbonize, help us get more renewables. Next slide. Okay, so just as an example, so this is a picture of a little piece of a grid, and it's showing how as supply and demand fluctuate, these different entities can actually change their load profiles in a proactive way. So commercial buildings or residential buildings can certainly do things like pre-cooling, or they may invest in distributed storage like batteries. But the manufacturing sector, if it becomes economical for them, they can actually do quite a bit and have a major impact on this idea of trying to resolve this supply and demand mismatch issue. So the manufacturer on the bottom left, you can see they can do things like speed up their production or slow it down. The one on the right can do things like run pumps and fill up storage tanks during off-peak hours so that when peak hours hit, you can turn those pumps down and rely on your built-in process storage. Next slide. And actually one more. So the Industrial Assessment Centers program, as has been alluded to, we're getting literally hundreds of students and faculty members and professional engineers out there, and we're seeing all of these different opportunities for industry partners to become not only more efficient, but also more intelligent in the way that they're running things. One of the major challenges with this idea of what we call grid responsive smart manufacturing is that every facility is different and unique. Unlike the buildings sector, where a building is a building, and I know there are some differences in technology and size and construction materials, but generally speaking, the principles are very similar. Industry is very diverse, all kinds of different SIC codes and NAICS codes, people making all sorts of different products with different processes and different schedules. Some of them are 24/7, some of them are just 5 days a week, and maybe 12 hours a day, just highly varied in this industrial sector. So the IAC program, in my very strong opinion, is such a great mechanism to really help us understand as a country what's going on out there in industry and what are the opportunities for improving our efficiency and our intelligent operating practices. Next slide. So as a case in point, and this is kind of an archaic rate structure, but this is actually very ubiquitous, where companies, industrial facilities, they pay a significant portion of their energy costs are based on their peak demand. So you'd have these demand charges, which in Utah, the prominent rate structure is that for whatever 15-minute interval during an entire month is the highest demand, that sets your demand charge. So there is already a significant economic incentive for industrial facilities to shift their demand. So we help them identify opportunities to do this within their existing rate structure. And this is not even being all that smart just yet. Click one more time. So if the company can do things like use more energy and store it up in some way during those low demand times of the day, they can dramatically reduce their peak and dramatically reduce their electric bills. So there is already a mechanism for companies to just behave a little bit smarter. I'm going to try and quickly.
Cody seems to have frozen. Sam, could you go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Cody, you were frozen for a while. You're back, I see.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, I will pick up where I was. So this particular case study is one that our IAC came across. We do these kind of studies. We have this really great partnership with our Office of Energy Development here in Utah, where they give us a little bit of amount of funding. It's pretty small relative to the IAC funding, but this allows us, when we come across a more complex or a more interesting assessment recommendation that we make during our IAC assessments, this extra bit of funding lets us dedicate a research student to do a deeper dive. And often that includes a simulation model, or we might do some machine learning kind of work to help these companies analyze these more complex solutions. So here's one that we came across a couple of years ago. This was a minerals processing facility that has some big ESG corporate initiatives. They were looking very closely at installing a large solar field at their site. So here I'm showing their real-time demand data in blue. And then if they installed solar, what would their net demand look like? So this is a rhetorical question, but see if you can notice what happens to their peak demand because of solar. So the answer is nothing. This facility doesn't have a particular diurnal cycle. So just coincidentally, the sun is not shining when they're hitting their peak demand. So in terms of their bill, it doesn't really help them at all with peak demand to install solar. This particular company also had quite an extreme demand charge. They're paying about $21 per kilowatt. And then they have a really low energy charge. They're paying about, if I recall, about 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour. So their bill is heavily shifted toward demand. So a natural solution to this might be to install a big bank of batteries. And so we definitely looked into that. We worked with vendors. We got some pretty rigorous quotes from vendors on how much would it cost to not only install the solar, but also a battery system. But as we examined their facility, we noticed that they already have this built-in storage. So one thing that they're doing is they're pumping water from underground wells. They feed that water.
Cody, let me interrupt for a second. Unfortunately, we have a hard stop at the half hour. So if I could ask you to speed up a little bit, that would be good.
Will do. Okay. So this particular facility already has this built-in storage system. They have pumps, which are all on variable frequency drives. So one thing that we recommended is, hey, instead of installing a battery system, what you can do is just intelligently schedule when you're pumping. So we recommended that they do all of their pumping during off-peak hours. Then they're filling up their storage tanks. Then they have enough water storage so that they can turn their pumps down or turn them off during peak hours, and that would reduce their peak. Next slide. So if they did this, they can dramatically reduce their peak. So their storage would get a little bit depleted during those peak demand hours for energy, but then during the off-peak hours, they can fill the tank back up again. Next slide, please. Oh, and I think when my slides got translated, it messed up my little box there. So if we look at these different scenarios, so we analyze all these different scenarios, business as usual, if they install the solar system, if they install the battery system, if they did combinations. So I want you to look at the savings numbers in that fourth column, specifically for this smart pumping scheme. So what we determined is that if they just use their existing infrastructure coupled with some smarter controls, they could still achieve a savings of $370,000 a year just by operating their facility more intelligently. And this would only cost them about $250,000 because they really just need to invest in sensors and hardware and controls. So of all the different scenarios, so solar by itself had a 28-year payback, which is really not great. If they did a battery system by itself, it's 11.5 years, so that's a little bit better. Solar plus a battery is 17 years. But then our solution, this smart pumping, pays itself back in only 0.7 years. So this is quite remarkable for them, something with a really quick payback, and it's just operating your facility smarter. So how does this help the grid to decarbonize? Well, this facility now becomes a flexible asset that the grid can use. So even if solar is installed somewhere else on the grid operators can leverage a facility like this by sending them the right signals, either pricing signals or just keeping it within their existing peak demand structure or whatever. This facility becomes a flexible asset that not only helps them at the facility level financially, it can also help the grid to decarbonize. Next slide. So our IAC, especially with this really nice supplemental funding from our state energy office, we really specialize in this area that we call grid responsive smart manufacturing, or basically using that industrial flexibility to help individual facilities. So we've done the study that I just showed you in addition to a bunch of other studies, and we actually get these published in pretty high impact journals. We're trying really hard to disseminate our findings so that this practice could become more ubiquitous. And I don't pretend that there are not still some major technological challenges here. I'm hoping that the funding opportunity that I just mentioned from IEDO is gonna really help people develop technologies for manufacturers to be more flexible and smarter. All right, next slide, and this is my last one. And if you could just click through all the bullet points. So, so what we find here in Utah is that we have a really nice collaborative relationship. We have a really tight-knit energy community, and our state energy office is really at the center of that. So we interact a lot with them. We have other resources here, like we have a manufacturing extension partnership, the NIST program, which others have alluded to. There are pollution prevention programs from EPA. Our state energy office is really tied into universities and community colleges. So they're sort of the key in this hub of making all these different connections. And we don't expect our state energy office to have the expertise in all these different areas, but they're so good at identifying needs throughout the community and then helping make these partnerships, or if they identify a facility that might need an IAC assessment, for example, they do a really good job of connecting us with them so that we can go and provide this detailed technical support for them. I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague, Chris, from the Utah Office of Energy Development, who wanted to say a few words.
Yeah, Chris, feel free to unmute yourself.
All right, thank you very much. And Cody did a great job of describing a partnership that the Utah State Energy Office is very pleased to have. And Utah is extremely pro-business. Historically, it's been used to very low energy costs. That is beginning to change. And programs like the IAC are extremely helpful to Utah businesses who are also highly innovative and competitive. So anyway, we're really pleased to have this partnership, and thanks for the chance to say thanks to Cody and thanks to the IAC program.
Well, thank you, Cody. Thank you, Chris, for your remarks as well. We're running close to the end of time. We can handle a question or two, but I also, if Michelle Ferguson is still online, I know Pennsylvania DEP has supported, has used state energy program money to support energy assessments, and I believe your colleagues with PennTap are also participating in the call today. So Michelle, if you wanted to say anything, you are welcome to, not to put you on the spot, but your option.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine. I'm still here, Rodney. Yeah, for several years, Pennsylvania has partnered with PennTap, and some of the ladies we work with are on this call today, as well as ETAC and Northampton Community College. We've used formula funds through our state energy program dollars from DOE to provide energy assessments for small to mid-sized manufacturers. And right now we're kind of in an in-between phase, but we do plan to use SEP bill funding to continue our industrial energy assessment program. And we'll be putting out an RFP to solicit one or more contractors to do that program throughout the state. So we're looking forward to be able to continue that work. And I think it was just really great to hear about all of these different programs. And I think what we're doing really kind of complements what the IACs are doing in the other programs. So that's just one of the things we're working on with the industrial sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are running close to the end of time. I do, since I had Michelle speak, I'm wondering if any of the PennTap folks want to chime in about their role in Pennsylvania's technical assistance infrastructure.
Alana Colvin here, Associate Director for PennTap. We work, as Michelle mentioned, we work with the small to mid-sized businesses. Specifically, we have a strong focus on the industrial sector. And what we go and do is, with Penn State, educate these facilities to understand what can they take on, what can they do, and how can they implement projects. And then we take another hand in assisting with the plan for implementation. So if there is funding available in our state, if there's funding for those manufacturers to take on, we try to relate those resources together so that they can take on those plans and carry them through to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce what it is they're looking for, cost at the site, grow their site, have more employees, whatever the goals are of the site. We try to take that hand in hand and relate it back to the university as we can, and relate it back to our state plans as well.
Thank you, Alana. Appreciate that. And it does seem like with the state monies available, that can provide some of the matches for the upcoming IAC implementation funding that will be federally available. So just a thought for the various states in ways to, I guess now the word is braid. We used to say layer, but braiding different forms of funding to be able to fund things that might not otherwise be fundable. So unfortunately, we have a hard close in about 2 minutes. So maybe I'll just offer a few final words to thank all our speakers and our and the folks who chimed in towards the end, and to thank all of you in the audience as well. We will be planning another forum in about 2 months' time, more or less. Topic to be determined, but there are few ideas, but we do solicit your ideas. We will make the slides available, and we will provide an update to the working group, and we will add some other updates to the website with periodic emails to the working group as well. And as always, we welcome your suggestions and questions. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sam, for running things in the background, and take care, everyone. And we'll see you next time, and communicate electronically as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Result.